Hi everybody, this is Linda Abraham. I'm the president and founder of Accepted, and I'm going to be presenting Get Accepted to Stanford Business School this evening. A few housekeeping items before we dive into the material. We have posted for you to use a worksheet, and you can download it from your dashboard where you see downloads. I actually not seeing it at the moment on mine, but I'm sure it's on yours. So it's actually under handouts. I do see it. So take advantage, download it. You can use it to take notes, and I think it'll help you get the most you can out of the next hour or so. I also want to tell you that there will be Q&A at the end, so if you have questions, you can post them in the question window, and we'll choose the ones that we feel have broadest applicability and focus on those. I don't know that we'll be able to get through all of them based on our experience this morning. If we don't get to your question, feel free to post it on the Stanford Tips page, okay? And we'll be chatting out that URL to you later on. There's also going to be several URLs on different slides in the webinar. You don't have to write them down. They will be sent to you in a URL, in an email after the webinar is over. Okay, first of all, I want to thank you very, very much for coming. I know your time is valuable, and I've packed as much as I can into this hour. So before we start the webinar, I always like to learn a little bit about my audience. And the first question I have for you is, where are you located? City and state if you're in the United States, city and country if you're outside the United States. I'm in Los Angeles, California. Okay, we have people from Boston, Los Angeles, welcome, a neighbor, New York, Sao Paulo, Daytona Beach, Florida, Washington, D.C., Flint, Michigan, South San Francisco, Tampa, Florida, New York, Reston, Virginia, New York City, we got a couple people from L.A., Bogota, Colombia, Chicago, Compton, also basically L.A., Dallas, Chicago, Illinois. Anybody else? Got more people here, so there should be Australia. Ooh, what time is it there? Actually, it's not that bad, right? It's morning. Okay, my daughter-in-law is from Australia, from Melbourne. 8 a.m. All right, not that bad. Okay. Anybody else want to share? Columbus, Ohio, welcome. Welcome near and far. Anybody here for whom it's the middle of the night? Malaysia? It's getting there. Pittsburgh? Okay, great. Now that I know DC, wonderful. Okay, now that I know where you're at, welcome. We've spoken. Okay, now that I know where you're at geographically, I'd like to learn a little bit about where you're at in the application process. So, when are you planning to apply? The options are round 1, round 2, round 3, or later. Let's see. Again, you all did your exercise. I hope you all did your exercise. We should have a participatory group. We're at 71%. And if you could click on the options on your screen. Okay, 84% having voted, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're up actually at 87% having voted. That's fantastic. 77% round 1, 18% round 2, 5% round 3, and 15% later on. That's actually very parallel to this morning's group. You're a little bit more round 1 oriented, but that's okay. Second poll. Actually, you can see the results there. All right. So the second poll is, how committed are you to applying to Stanford? And the options are definitely, probably, maybe, doubt it, but my mother wants me to try. Okay. My kids could identify with the last one. All right. Let's see how's it going. We have, again, a definite winner here. And we're at 83% having voted, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fantastic, 88% having voted. There are the results. And it's 74% definitely, 17% probably, 7% maybe, and 2% doubt it. So you're actually a little less committed to Stanford than the group this morning. That's also kind of interesting. I want to mention that I'll be giving away some free copies of the book that I co-authored a few years ago with Accepted consultant Judy Gruen. It's called MBA Mission for Smarties. And I'll be giving it away as a prize in the contest we'll have then. The questions that I'm going to ask as part of the contest are all going to be based on what's been discussed here or what will be discussed here in the next hour. So pay attention and you can have a chance to win. It's cool, it's hip, it's the most entrepreneurial of the top MBA programs with 15% of the 2016 grads starting their own business at graduation. It's Stanford, and it's at the heart of Silicon Valley's entrepreneurial ecosystem. According to PitchBook, Stanford GSB is ranked in the top 3 for MBA programs that send the most grads into private equity and venture capital firms. That's another specialty of Stanford's. It has a highly customizable program, small class size, and weather that can't be beat, except perhaps by my alma mater, UCLA. Now, the rest of the webinar will be devoted to helping you get accepted to Stanford, and the plan is to go through the 4 key strategy steps and apply the strategy to Stanford GSB. You can use the strategy framework or roadmap or formula or whatever you want to call it on other top programs too. And then I'm also going to spend the last, I would say, third or so of the webinar and turn to tactics given specifically the 2017-2018 application. Throughout the webinar, or different points in the webinar, I'm going to issue warnings, caveats, things that I think you should be aware of and preferably avoid because I've seen applicants do them over my last 20 years as a consultant. And I'm going to do that right now as we start. You want to submit to Stanford, because it's the only thing that's going to work, a substantive application. You don't want to use a little bit of makeup, even spin, or magic wands in your attempt to get into Stanford. They simply won't work. What you need to provide is a substantive competitive application, and by that I mean competitive qualifications and an effective presentation of those qualifications in a way that demonstrates fit. Your overriding aim is to show that you belong at Stanford. Now, let's dive into the nitty-gritty. And I'd like you in the question window right now to tell me how you intend to show you belong at Stanford GSB. If you could answer in the question window. Yeah, we're going to use the question window for both your questions and your answers. How do you intend to show that you belong at Stanford GSB? Briefly. I'm going to spend the next hour talking about it. I want you to spend a couple of seconds writing about it. I'm going to guess that the system is a little bit frozen because I'm not getting, here we go. High GRE score, patent, business forming. Those will all help you, okay? By showing that my values align with their values, excellent Quadri. Being an entrepreneurial leader, that will definitely help Nishant. High GRE score. A high GRE score is a small part of getting into Stanford. It's an important part, but it's not going to do it on its own. That you're a technology leader, that's pretty good, Alyssa. Showing leadership experience, very good. Being specific and tailoring to GSB, excellent, Hillary. Unique background to contribute to my GSB classmates, that's good, Brandon, excellent. It's definitely part of it. I'm going to show them I'm interested in being an entrepreneurial change maker. That's good, Madupe. If I mispronounce somebody's name, please forgive me. Community outreach, leadership in STEM fields, good. Extensive college involvement, that's definitely part of it. Entrepreneurship experience, that's part of it, but you're going to have to stand out from all the other people with entrepreneurial experience that apply. Show how I can change lives, change organizations. Miranda, that's good, as long as you don't just spit back the phrase. You can actually show it. Differentiating myself from the rest of the applicants. That's easy to say, Devi, hard to do. You need to be more specific about that. And that's something we're going to discuss. To show that I want to enforce change in the world. Okay. Medicine. I think it's referring to something else. Being clear about my post-MBA goals, demonstrating my entrepreneurial skills and strong leadership skills. That's definitely going to be part of it. Tala. Proof of leading and fundraising a global nonprofit mission. That will help you. Okay, you guys get the idea. Definitely you're all getting part of it. What I'm going to try and do here, on some level my question was unfair because I'm going to spend the next hour telling you what you need to do, and I was giving you a couple of seconds to write a short blurb in the question window. I am going to present to you a 4-part framework. Some would say formula, some would say roadmap. Choose the word you want. But my main point here is going to be that your application has to contain all 4 elements. So let's start with the first one. The first one is that you need to demonstrate you can do the work in Excel. That is absolutely foundational. Stanford is a top school. It gets top students, and it doesn't get them for no reason. There's no question that they want people who can excel, who do excel academically. Now, the easiest way to show that you can do the work and thrive is through your undergraduate transcript and test score. And ideally, you want to be at or above the averages for accepted students for both test scores and grades. Now, let's focus on the grades for a minute. If not, if you don't have excellent grades, how can you convince Stanford to accept you with below average grades? Well, let's first look at what is average. The average for Stanford's last incoming class was a 3.73 on the U.S. Scale. And averages are what they are because some people are accepted with below average numbers. That's just how it works. So if you have a 3.5 or a 3.6, it doesn't mean you're automatically you're going to get rejected. But the farther away you are below the average, and if both your grades and test scores are below average, the less likely it is that you can effectively demonstrate you can do the work and compete. All right, so if you're a little below average, or maybe your quant grades weren't that great, what you can do now is take business-related classes and earn A's in them if you have a problematic GPA or a lack of quant classes. You may also want to consider certificates like the CFA if it's relevant to your goals. If your quant skills are weak, if you're the proverbial poet, but your grades are good, consider something like MBAmath.com or quant courses at a local college. Statistics for business, calculus if you have the prerequisites and remember them, economics, accounting, massive open online courses, MOOCs, are also an option. A high test score can mitigate, especially not just the GMAT, the GRE or the GMAT can work, but it's a particularly hard to have a high test score at Stanford because the average test score is so high. It's 737 for the class entering in 2016, which is 96th percentile overall. That is the highest GMAT score of any U.S. MBA program ranked by U.S. News. As a matter of fact, Stanford has the highest GMAT, the highest GPA, and the lowest acceptance rate of any U.S. GMAT, of any U.S. school. If your score is considerably below Stanford's 80th percentile, or just below 80th percentile overall on verbal or quant, I would consider and recommend a retake for you, at least considering a retake. If you're not sure whether to retake or not, please see either of the 2 resources mentioned on the slide, that GMAT score, which is a short blog post video actually, and then that GMAT score is a webinar, and again, we will be sending out these URLs. Somehow, some way, the bottom line here is you need to show you can do the work successfully and not struggle with either basic math or communications. That's goal number 1. Goal number 2, have a clear, realistic idea why you want an MBA from Stanford GSB and how you intend to use it. So Stanford, this is based on last year's application, by the way. Any screen shares are from last year's app. The new one isn't out yet. Provides in this application just a couple of boxes where you should list your desired industry and your desired job function. Those are the classic components of a post-MBA goal. But it also gives you 255 characters, which is basically a couple of sentences, to write a sentence about what you aspire to do after graduating. Now, in terms of aspirations, in an information session that I attended at Stanford a couple of years ago, the speaker said that Stanford wants you to aspire to achieve insane levels of greatness and never settle. So aspirations by their nature can be a little bit dreamlike, they can be longer term, and they can be even less likely for achievement because they're aspirational. But they can be more of a stretch. But the short-term goals, those should be very concrete and something that should be very achievable when you graduate from Stanford. Now, why do you think, in the question window, please tell me, why do you think goals are important to the schools? Why do you think they care? Okay, here we go. They need to make sure you're going to get a job after, so they want to assess if your goals are reasonable. That's exactly it, Madupi. They want to see if they can help you succeed. It's just that simple. Just that simple. Yeah. And it's so important that when Judy and I wrote our book, MBA Missions for Smarties, the first thing we started with is this Yogi Berra quote: if you don't know where you're going, you might wind up someplace else. If you don't have a goal in mind, there's no way that the school can know if it can help you succeed. There's no real measure for the school's success. If you say you want to go into medicine, it's not a medical school. Clearly, you're going in another direction. So the goal tells them they can help you succeed. Admissions should be able to connect the dots between where you've been and what you want to do via Stanford's program, career strengths, and extracurricular opportunities. That's number 2, right? Let's move on to number 3. And several of you mentioned this element in your responses to my first question. Number 3 is show that you have what Stanford seeks. Now, Stanford has on every page of its website its motto: change lives, change organizations, change the world. As a result of this motto, that's what they value. You should be able in your application to show yourself as a change agent, somebody who's initiated change, managed change, is open to change. And as a matter of fact, this bit about being open to change is really important because Stanford views the MBA experience as a transformational experience, and you have to be willing to be transformed. It is a defining, and in my view, the defining characteristic of Stanford students is a willingness to take initiative when they saw a need. The successful applicants that I worked with, that was the defining characteristic. A willingness to solve problems and offer solutions. A willingness to initiate and manage change. In addition to this motto clearly being a guiding mission for Stanford, Stanford clearly states 3 criteria. 1, intellectual vitality. And by that, they mean that they're looking for curiosity and an openness to learning new things. And that can be evident in the classes you took undergrad, your minor, possibly an interest in a dual degree program, or other interests and hobbies that you discuss in your application at different points. They want to see a genuine interest in expanding intellectual horizons throughout the application. Again, openness to change. They don't want to see a checklist or treadmill approach to life. I did this because I wanted to do that, because I want to do that, because I want to do that. Doesn't mean you can't plan, but if that's all that you can show, you might want to look elsewhere. They also, the second of Stanford's criteria is demonstrated leadership potential. The key word here is demonstrated. They do not want to create leaders from nothing. So you have to have led in the past as a demonstration of your potential and be open to improving your leadership skills. A key GSB assumption is past actions usually are the best predictor of future behavior. For Stanford and for most business schools, okay, so that's one concept. In addition, for Stanford and for most business schools, leadership implies integrity and character. Obviously, that's not always true. We can all think of bad, evil leaders, but there's that component to it too. And I think fundamentally, leadership means assuming responsibility for a particular outcome and motivating others. Stanford likes to call it directed idealism. And again, it's behavioral, behavior that reflects your ideals. The third of Stanford's criteria they label as personal qualities and contributions. And by that, I think they're looking for more individuality and distinctiveness and your ability to contribute uniquely to the class. Now, in Stanford's words, most Stanford MBA students have excelled by doing ordinary things extraordinarily well. It is what you make of an experience that matters to us, not simply the experience itself. So there's the element of perspective, right? Your individual perspective and ability to contribute uniquely. This is by far the most difficult to grasp and subjective of Stanford's criteria. The one thing I'm convinced of is that superficiality, the makeup, the magic wand, superficiality and canned responses will hurt and possibly kill your chances of acceptance. But individuality poses less of a risk than uniformity. So when you're answering questions, don't, especially the why part of questions, don't just give the first answer that comes to mind. Ask yourself then, why is that so? And then why is that so? Until you finally peel away the onion and you get to something that's a little bit deeper, more reflective, and probably much more individual. Now, Stanford has in its application a small box called More About You. Last year they gave you 1,200 characters to answer the question. Tell us about a time in the last 2 years when your background or perspective influenced your participation at work or school. So, well, one thing here is write about something that you're not writing about elsewhere, and they want to see you in an active role, participation at work or school, and something recent, last 2 years. I think the key question here is, do you act based on your beliefs and values, your background, your perspective? So be prepared to bring something like that out. And again, it can be at work or school, but it should be something that's not covered in any depth elsewhere in the application. Again, I'm going to comment on the difference between mouthing platitudes, this is one of my warnings, mouthing platitudes, spitting back websites, and showing that you share the values. The former, well, it's just that magic wand, superficial stuff. It doesn't change substance. And like makeup, believe me, it doesn't get rid of the wrinkles. But examples in your essays, bullet points in your resume, especially concrete, quantified bullet points, items in your job descriptions, and realize that what you put in the boxes is increasingly important. Those provide substance. Those are the opposite of the magic wand. The information in the application boxes, the letters of recommendation, and the responses to interview questions must all demonstrate that you are a change agent and that you meet the 3 criteria we're discussing now. I'd like you to write down for yourself, you can do it on the back of the worksheet if you printed it out, ways in which you can demonstrate at least one of these qualities, okay? Just for yourself. You don't have to put it in the window. Okay, you writing it down? All right, we're going to go on. We're going to go on. So you don't have to spit back phrases at all. You must present yourself authentically. In order to do that, you must know the person you see in the mirror, be willing to applaud, and reflect that individual human being throughout your application. Another warning, focus on rankings or Stanford GSB's brand. And by that I mean Silicon Valley, Google, Nike, HP, etc. The cliches can obscure this fit aspect of admissions as well as contributing to you focusing on the wrong things. And the result will be that while Stanford stands out, you will blend in. You want to stand out in a positive way, and you want to show that you have the distinctive experience and perspective to contribute to the Stanford GSB community. Stanford has lots and lots of applicants. I mentioned that has the lowest acceptance rate of any MBA program in the United States and can be choosy. And that leads to my last strategic point, the last element in my framework. Number 4, demonstrate that you'll be able to contribute distinctively to class discussions and teamwork, the school's community, and ultimately make the admissions office proud that they voted to admit you. So you need, well, your perspective, your automatically individual idiosyncratic perspective. That we discussed a little bit in terms of the need for individual perspective as in relation to Stanford's third criteria on personal characteristics. But this issue of contributing distinctively, it's not just perspective. You also need a track record as a contributor, a person who makes a difference and has impact. And you need to show that you have had impact in the past through your resume, essays, activity history, interview, and letters of recommendation. And that impact closely relates to Stanford's values as reflected in its motto. And of course, here again, you have the concept that past behavior predicts future behavior. So you need to show you've made a difference in the past in order to show that you're going to make a difference at Stanford and beyond. So do you have the work experience quantitatively and qualitatively that will allow you to contribute? Have you made a contribution off the job as well as on the job through community service? You don't have to have necessarily contributed in these organizations or the millions of organizations that are out there. You do have the option of starting your own organization or group if you see a specific need in your community, however you define your community. That's all going to be fine. There's really a lot of latitude here, but you need to be able to show that you've contributed and made a difference. So have you been a change agent in the past is really a fundamental question. I'd like you at this point in the question window to give me a few examples of where you have been a change agent, and I'll comment on them. Okay. Where have you been a change agent in the past? Cancer research with Harvard Medical School. Okay, that's good. I'd like to also see a little bit about the results and how that research might relate to your needing an MBA. Now, that's a little bit different than what I asked, but that's something that I'd be really curious about. Teach for America. Okay, I realize you don't have the room here, but what was the impact on your students? How many students did you impact? Did you innovate in some way in your involvement in Teach for America? Lead brand development, marketing, communications efforts for a fitness social tech startup. Excellent. Can you quantify results? You don't have to do it here, but how many people did you manage? How much money was involved? What was the impact on the startup? Mentored for big brothers, big sisters. Again, how many people, how many kids did you mentor? For how long? What was the impact? Became a mentor to young females in high school and college. Excellent, Rakesh. Again, can you somehow quantify the impact? I hope you're getting seeing a thread here in my comments, my responses. Previously, I volunteered as core liaison officer at a local community. I was engaged in community-based service. Okay, that looks interesting, but it's way too general. What did you do? Did you lead something? Did you have some impact, Henry? Okay, this looks interesting. I have changed women's lives through a hormone balance not being having on a monthly basis by creating a now patent-pending vitamin pack that coincides with monthly cycle. Very interesting, Jennifer. That could be good. Again, I'd like to know how many women you impacted. How did their lives change? Were they bedridden for a week of every month? Are they now holding a job and pain-free? You know, that kind of thing. I'm implementing an initiative to raise the visibility of my team's business within our larger organizations, better marketing to internal and external client stakeholders. Okay, Steve, that's good. Quantify it, all right? Started up my office's LGBT network. Again, quantify the impact. How did that change things for the participants? With cancer research, we are employee relations for an underserved community. That's way too general. What was your role? What was the impact? How long did you do it? Was there a budget? Okay, I hope you guys are getting, I'm going to move on now because we have a lot to cover. I hope you folks are getting what I'm trying to come across here. You want to be specific in your descriptions of what you did. You want to describe the problem, describe the impact you had, Quantify if possible. If not, give me some specific examples of how you have changed lives. Okay, let's move on. I'm not going to give my examples because your examples were very good. Or here's one. Developed an app to help cancer patients deal with friends and relatives who want help, okay, who want to help them. I worked in social supply chain management, and realized a way to cut transportation costs and time to market by 10%. Those kinds of things. Focus on specifics will allow you to stand out. And remember, the fourth part of my framework is showing that you can contribute distinctively. And also reveal you to be a unique individual that you definitely are. So here I'd like to pose a couple of polls for you, okay? Actually, it's 4 polls. How many of you can identify with this? Again, click on the appropriate option. How many of you have traveled outside your home country? Okay, we got 74% having voted, and 76, can we get it up over 80%? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, we're at 83%. Share results. So 98% of you have traveled outside your home country. Okay? And how many of you, the next poll is, how many of you have visited Machu Picchu in South America? Somebody, I think, here from Colombia, Bogota, Bogota, Colombia, sorry. You might have, but apparently some others have also. All right, we're at 80% having voted, 84%, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here I'm going to share the results. So it's 8% have visited Machu Picchu, and 92% have not. Okay, that's pretty much what I expected. And here are the next 2 polls. How many of you have volunteered in or since college? Any kind of formal volunteer commitment? You guys are great. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, with 83% having voted. Let's share this. 92% have volunteered in some capacity, and 8% have not. Okay, let's hide it, and let me ask the next question. How many of you have started a group for siblings who have unfortunately lost siblings? This is a pretty unusual one, I realize. Okay, with 80% having voted, fortunately, I'm actually very happy to say that none of you have started such a group. I hope it means that none of you have experienced the loss of a sibling. So here's the results. Okay, excellent. What's the difference between the first questions that I asked and the second question that I asked? Specific, that's right, Elisa. And what happens when we talk in specific terms as opposed to general terms, right? Details. What happens? What's the result? If I ask no, it has more of an impact, that's true. It distinguishes you. If you write about volunteering in general terms, exactly, Julie, it gets unique. Mariah, it's right. You can stand out in a unique way. Exactly. Just by writing in specific terms, you individuate. That's what I'm trying to get to. Okay? So when you describe what you're doing, are you an engineer or a biomedical engineer? Are you a consultant or an environmental consultant? Did you volunteer or did you found a new organization to address a specific need in your community, however you define your community? Again, we're talking here about showing an ability to contribute distinctively to Stanford. If you write in general terms, you're going to be like 90% of the other applicants, just like you were when I asked questions in general terms. But if you write in specific terms, you're going to be distinctive, if not unique. Now, why is distinctive contribution important? Well, for one thing, it's one of Stanford's criteria. We discussed that when we discussed our third criteria. But there's another reason, and this applies at other programs as well. Part of it has to do with Stanford's ability to be choosy. That's how I started the section. But let's listen to Derek Bolton's advice. In a GMAC article several years ago, he wrote about admissions as a two-step process. And the first step in that process is evaluation, determining the qualified. And at top MBA programs, and certainly at Stanford, there are always too many qualified applicants. And that leads to the next step, selection. Crafting a class determining which candidates to admit among those evaluated as highly qualified. And that injects a very subjective element and hard to understand from the applicant's perspective dimension to the admissions process. But the implication from this statement and from this statement is that because of the selection process, Stanford has no reason to admit you if you're like everybody else. They value diversity. They have no reason to admit someone without something distinctive to contribute, or someone who is not a change agent, someone lacking a record of past impact and contributions, no matter what their stats. Because there will always be somebody at Stanford who has excellent stats and can show that they could contribute. All right, let's review the 4 strategic steps you need to think about before and while putting your application together. You need to demonstrate you can do the in-class work in Excel. You need to have a clear, realistic idea why you want an MBA from Stanford and how you intend to use it. You want to show that you share Stanford's values and meet its criteria. Remember that motto. And 4, you want to demonstrate that you'll be able to contribute to class discussions, the school's community, and ultimately make the school proud to have you as an alum. Now, let's look at some of the specific elements of the Stanford GSB application. I already touched briefly on the grades and transcripts, as well as GSB's values. Let's look at a few other elements. First of all, the job and activity history. Be succinct. The resume should be no more than 1 page, as strongly suggested by Stanford. A good rule of thumb is 1 page per decade of experience. For less than 10 years of experience, 1 page is usually enough. Honest. That was a quote from Stanford. I know that there was at least one person here who's at 10 years, so you might be on the cusp of a 2-page resume, but try and keep it to 1. Focus on achievements in your resume and in your job and history and activity history, not responsibility descriptions. And I mentioned this before, I'm going to repeat it again. Don't treat the forms and boxes as a throwaway, as an afterthought. They are very important. For each job, you have to respond to each of these 4 questions, except for your current one. You don't have to answer reason for leaving. And realize that if you have a few jobs, I think 3 jobs to write about, and you will have more in your job descriptions than in your essays, more words or characters. Quantify impact whenever possible. That comment should not come as a surprise, given what I did a few minutes ago. And for your activity history, very similar directions and questions as with the job history, but you also need to rank in order of importance to you. Don't be afraid about that ranking process. Just genuinely respond what's most important. They're trying to get to know you. Okay, let's move on to the essays. You have 1150 words for the 2 essays that you can allocate as you wish, but Stanford does provide some guidelines. The essays should complement the other elements of your application, answer the questions posed, and reveal something distinctive and interesting about you. Now, Stanford suggests that you give 750 words for essay A and 400 for B. I would loosely follow their guidelines, but it doesn't have to be exact by any means. The essays are great places to both show fit and reveal yourself as a thoughtful, distinctive change agent. They're also a great place to demonstrate and reveal the individual perspective that comes under Stanford's 3rd criteria, and to show the kind of ability to contribute that we spoke about a minute ago. Now, Stanford's Essay 1 is, in my view, its signature question: what matters to you most and why? It's been Stanford's question for at least 10 years, probably longer. The suggested length is 750 words, and in my opinion, this is the hardest MBA essay question. You really need to think about what is important to you, why it's important, and when you have acted on your values. What are your priorities? Because if you say something's important to you and you've never done anything with it, it's not going to be very persuasive. I have found, and I've said this before in the webinar, and I'm going to repeat it now, that those who answer this question in a way that shows initiative and an I care attitude do well in the admissions process. Finally, don't forget to answer the why part. Stanford explicitly says, focus on the why rather than the what. And I would encourage you, as I mentioned earlier, the first why, when you come up with your first response to why, well, ask yourself again, why? And then ask yourself again, why? And it might be the second, third, or fourth response that really gets to the heart of your reasoning and is a little bit more specific and less generic. Second Stanford question, simple. Why Stanford? And that's so simple, but it's not so simple, is it? Okay, you need two things to respond well here. First, you need to know why you want to pursue an MBA. This is almost always tied to goals and aspirations briefly mentioned in the employment section. Remember that slide I showed you probably about half an hour ago? For your immediate post-MBA goal, as we discussed, you're going to define that in terms of function and industry, what you want to do, and the industry in which you want to do it. It might have a geographic element to it. That's fine. And for why Stanford, you certainly can include those insanely awesome goals or dreams, aspirations. If it isn't obvious why an MBA will help you advance towards that aspiration, you may want to include your reasoning. The second thing you really need to know well in order to respond to this question is you need to understand Stanford's program. How will you take advantage of Stanford's tailored curriculum, diverse teaching methods, and what specific programs and strengths of Stanford are going to help you achieve your goals? Will it be the design school? Will it be all the entrepreneurial resources that Stanford provides? And don't talk in general about entrepreneurial resources. Know which ones you want to take advantage of and which ones are best suited to helping you achieve your goals. This is not a question about brand or ranking. And then be able to explain to Stanford how, given your past experience in education, you will take advantage of Stanford GSB's transformative opportunities and program to achieve your goal. That's the guts of Stanford too. What it shouldn't be an ode to the wonderful faculty, unparalleled career opportunities, and fantastic peers at Stanford. Because you know what? That's just general garbage. It can be said about any school, and it will probably just get you rejected. Again, specifics count. Now think of what we've been discussing in terms of Stanford's motto and its criteria. Can you relate these questions, especially SAA, to either the motto or the criteria? Just think about it. You don't have to answer in the question window. I would suggest that especially for SAA, you can use an anecdotal response and tell a story, incorporating what you did and how you did it and felt, and the impact of what you did on others and on you. And this would be particularly appropriate for SAA. Start with an anecdote. Here's a couple of suggestions. Again, this is just ideas. You don't have to do it this way. An anecdote that epitomizes your values and living a value, and then discuss the influence that experience had on others and on you. And don't forget the why. Or start with an influential moment that made you realize the importance of whatever is important to you, and then bring it forward. Discuss how incorporating that particular belief or perspective into your life has changed your behavior and how it's going to impact you going forward and why it's now important to you. Remember the why. Okay, let's move on to recommendations. Stanford has 2 required recommendations. It wants 1 reference from your current direct supervisor or next best alternative. And then for the second one, it gives you your choice of either 1 additional supervisor reference or 1 peer reference. Obviously, you need to follow Stanford's requirements. I have 2 criteria also for recommenders. 1, the 2 recommenders should know you well, and they should be able to comment from personal experience on your ability as a manager and a future leader. Ask if each is willing to write a strong, positive letter of reference for you. If there's any hesitation, for any reason, move on and ask somebody else. Just like with your essays and just like with everything else we've been talking about, encourage specifics, concrete examples, and ask your recommenders to focus on initiative, leadership, personal growth, impact, and innovation. And we do have tips for recommenders, as you can see at this URL. Again, we'll be sending it out after the webinar. Let's move on to the interview. What can you expect in the Stanford GSB interview? It's usually conducted by alumni. It's usually blind in the sense that all they know is what they see in your resume. And it's behavioral. It will focus on past behavioral because, as we've said, past behavior predicts future behavior. How should you prepare? Well, first of all, review Stanford's MBA interview page. They really do give you fantastic advice and insight into what you can expect. I also suggest you review with a little bit more skepticism, but still review GMAT clubs and Beat the GMAT's threads before you interview so you can perhaps see some interview feedback. You can read blogs with applicants who have interviewed if you find them. I also encourage you to review your application before you interview. You're going to have your best stories in there, and again, the interviewer will not have read your application. So yes, you may be able to and want to bring in something more recent. That's fine, but you may want to reuse some of the elements that are in the application. Prepare to explore your past experiences to show fit with Stanford's value and criteria. So what I would suggest you do is jot down some things that you're really proud of, and then in like one column in the spreadsheet, and then to the right of that, put the qualities that you think that Stanford values that these experiences allow you to show. That's one way to go. Another way, and perhaps parallel or different, you can do it separately, is identify, take some of Stanford's quality and then identify some achievements that show those qualities. You can go either way and may even want to go both ways. Also, prepare questions to ask about Stanford and about the alumnus' experience both at Stanford and as an alum. Okay, let's go back to your goal in submitting an application to Stanford, which is show that you belong at Stanford. Let's go through the 4 key strategies for demonstrating you belong at Stanford. One more time. Provide evidence you can do the work, a realistic goal requiring an MBA from Stanford. You want to demonstrate that you will be able to, that you share Stanford's values and meet its criteria, and also reveal that you will be able to contribute distinctively to class discussions and teamwork, the school's community, and ultimately make the school proud. Now, it's time for our little contest here. The first one to answer, let's say the first 2 to answer each question gets a copy of MBA Missions for Smarties. Will be Kindle outside the U.S., paperback, or Kindle in the U.S. The first question, and you can respond in the question window, but please put the entire answer in before you hit enter. What is Stanford's motto? Okay, here it comes. Steve, you got it. Change lives, change organizations, change the world. And Modupi, you have it. Rachel, you got their names? Okay, great. Yeah, most of you got that. Change lives, change organizations, change the world. Okay, good. All right, next question. And again, the first 2 to get this will win a copy of MBA Missions for Smarties. What are Stanford's 3 admissions criteria? Thanks everybody for participating. Okay, what are Stanford's 3 key admissions criteria in one response? You must be pounding the keyboards and clogging the... All right, here we go. Great. Okay. Rakesh, intellectual vitality, leadership potential, personal qualities. You got that. And Brandon, intellectual vitality, demonstrated leadership potential, personal qualities and contributions. Excellent. Okay. Very good. Rachel, you got those 2 names? Okay. If you, I guess they should email webinar@accepted.com and then we'll get the books to them, right? Is that correct? Okay. Okay, great. All right. some closing words of advice for you. The admissions committee readers are smart, intelligent professionals. Don't try to craft, fake, or cover up, and trust me, that dab of makeup won't do it. The best presentation of you is an authentic reflection of your achievements and dreams, keeping in mind the 4 framework elements that will persuade Stanford to want you. Okay, I started the webinar by saying that from my perspective, my goal for the evening is to make sure that you understand all 4 elements are important to a successful Stanford MBA application. Raise your hand if you understand that now. Raising hand means you click on the hand icon on your dashboard, by the way. All right, got a pretty good percentage. Yes, and some of you are responding in the question window. Okay, great, wonderful, well over 50%. Good, you're a wonderful audience. That's really the almost final thought, the next to final thought I want to leave with you today. It's all 4 elements of this 4-part framework that you need in your application, not just 1, not 3 out of the 4, because to get accepted, you need to show that you both belong at Stanford, that's parts 1 through 3, and stand out in the applicant pool, that's part 4. This framework gives you the what of a successful applicant. And you've gotten several general tips and even some specific ones on how to create the application that shows you both fit in and stand out for Stanford. What you need now, however, is the how applied to your individual circumstances. Again, we've been talking about specifics. For that, you need to get accepted and work with one of our outstanding consultants. We want to guide you in showing that you both belong at Stanford or whatever MBA program you're aiming for, and are a standout in the applicant pool. We want to guide you in creating an application that as a whole spotlights your strengths and mitigates your weaknesses, and an application that accomplishes everything we've discussed today. Here's what you get at Accepted: a customized approach that fits your needs, not one size fits all. Options, so that if you only need a little help with one element of the application, that's what you get. If you're starting from scratch and want comprehensive assistance, that's what you get. You also get one dedicated advisor who, in addition to already being an MBA admissions expert, and you're going to meet a couple of our staff members in just a minute because they'll help me in answering questions, in addition to being an expert in MBA admissions, will become expert in you and your story and helping you present it. And fourth, you'll get candor and objectivity, plus a supportive mentor combined with decades of experience in MBA admissions. Now, some may say that Accepted is expensive, and we're definitely not cheap because of the quality of our staff. They're former admissions directors, they've sat on admissions committee, some are professional writers, published authors, others have been MBA admissions consultants for 10, 15, 20 years. And to access that kind of expertise, I have to pay, and ultimately you have to pay. However, rather than focusing on the cost of Accepted, why don't we discuss for a minute the risks of not using Accepted? Reapplication can easily cost a few $1,000s. One additional year of pre-MBA earnings can cost in the 5 figures in dollars. One additional year of a job you dislike if you're currently in that position. And then there's a potential that you could have gotten into a better program with lifelong higher earnings and network, and that could cost you 5 figures, even 6 figures easily. Every year we work with applicants who talked to us a year earlier and decided after taking the do-it-yourself approach and getting rejected that they wanted to work with us. They would have been better off working with us initially, and so would you. But enough from me. What do accepted clients say? One client story. This client had below average for Stanford stats and other challenges. Natalie Grimblatt Epstein, accepted consultant and former admissions director at 3 programs, worked with him closely. He wrote Natalie, "I'm really excited to be going to Stanford. You probably hear this a lot." Actually, he wrote me, didn't write Natalie. You probably hear this a lot, but Natalie was really helpful. In all the interviews I had, there wasn't a single question that I wasn't ready for. I owe a large part of my success to her. Or this feedback, which is the second one, from a different client who worked on the Stanford app with Michelle Stockman. "I'm in at Stanford GSB. Thank you for your pivotal support. I really believe you made a significant impact on my application and acceptance. Very different people and challenges, and same result at Stanford. Now, I can't promise that all our clients, and I can't say all our clients are accepted to Stanford, but we'd sure like to make a significant impact and guide you to acceptance. So what should you do now? It's now June. There's time before Stanford's Round 1 deadline to work with us. Contact us ASAP, and we'd be happy to help you from scratch or review and edit your essays. After the webinar is over today, I suggest you go to accepted.com/MBA/services, review our services, choose a service that's right for you, and get the guidance that you need to apply confidently and effectively. Our goal is to guide you so that you present all 4 parts of this critical framework and show that you both belong at Stanford and are stand out in the applicant pool. And now I'd like to take your questions. I know we've been flagging them as we go. I'd also like to introduce, and we're running a little bit over, so I appreciate those of you who are sticking around. I'd like to introduce Esmeralda Cardinal, former admissions director at Yale, and also she was associate director at Yale. You want to unmute yourself, Esmeralda? I'll unmute you. Oh, there we go. Okay, you're set. Former admissions director, associate admissions director at Yale, and the admissions director at Michigan State Broad School, and also Madeline Wang. I'm going to unmute you now. Madeline is a Wharton grad who served on the student admissions committee there. Madeline, you there? I'm having some trouble. You have to unmute yourself. There we go. Hi, Madeline.
There we go.
Okay.
Hi.
After getting her MBA from Wharton as a Palmer Scholar, she worked in financial services for I don't know, many years, let's put it that way, rising to senior VP level, and now she's joined Accepted. So let's take a look at some of these questions, okay? Thank you both for helping me out here. Okay, Steve asked, how common are applicants with 9+ years of experience, and what should they highlight in their applications? In terms of common, they're definitely not that common in the 2-year program at Stanford. Stanford also has the MSX program where people with 9+ years of experience, that's what they're supposed to have. So that's one option at Stanford. And it's a very good one, by the way. If you want to apply to the 2-year MBA program and you are applying as a more experienced applicant, because that's really what they're looking at, let's see. Esmeralda, do you want to give some suggestions as to how the more experienced applicant can apply successfully to a full-time 2-year MBA program?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you well. Welcome. Thank you.
Wonderful. I would say if you have that many years of experience, you are definitely not going to be the majority of the applicant pool, but the minority, like Linda said. So I would highlight the level of leadership you've had and growth in those times. So it's very, very important that they see that they're getting a true leader and the impact they have made throughout those years of working, you know, as opposed to getting your MBA 4 years or 5 years ago.
Okay, great. Madeline, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so what I would say is for an applicant who has many years of experience, and especially if you're applying to Stanford, I mean, I think you want to, in your application, be able to show both a combination of the fact that you've had, you know, extraordinary accomplishments. I mean, this certainly applies to everyone who applies, but if you've been out of the workforce for many years, then you have that many more years.
You mean out of school? You mean in the workforce for many years?
Yeah, if you've been in the workforce out of undergraduate for many years, then you know you really need to be able to show that you've accomplished quite a lot then over those 9+ years, and as well, you know, I think you need to be quite clear about why you need the MBA, because you know, part of the reason why typically applicants have fewer years of experience is because you know, you're really looking for the MBA to help you kind of achieve your next goal. And if you've been out of school for that long, then, you know, why do you need it now?
Right. I was thinking the same thing, and as Madeline mentioned, Stanford actually has one of the lower average ages at matriculation of top MBA programs. I think it's particularly important for more experienced applicants to be able to explain why they need an MBA, and you're kind of caught in this double whammy where on one hand you have to be showing that you've been growing and achieving for the last 9 years and that you still need an MBA. So that's part of it. There also is probably a little concern, though it's probably less at Stanford, that the placement office is very much geared for people with, let's say, 4 to 7 years of work experience who are probably still in their 20s. So you have to make clear that you know what you want to do when you graduate, and you're not going to be really relying on the career services office exclusively to find that position. Okay, let's move on. Does that help you, Steve? Hope so. All right, let's see what we have here. Okay, this is a good one. This is from Cynthia. Does what you write for your post-MBA aspirations have an impact on your application? I.e., strategy consultant may be too generic of a response. I'm going to, Esmeralda, why don't you take that again? Start with that.
If it's too, I'm sorry.
Let me repeat the question. Sure. Does what you write for your MBA aspirations have an impact on your application? And if I want to be a strategy consultant, maybe too generic of a response.
I think you have to be it definitely affects your application.
Yes.
Because they would want to see first if your aspirations are reasonable, if they can place you after your MBA, and if you're not just dreaming about your aspirations, but if it's something realistic. And definitely you want to be specific, as Linda mentioned in the webinar, as specific as possible to stand out. If you are too generic, if you don't give much explanation than, let's say, strategy consulting or something like that, then you run the risk of not even being remembered, not standing out that much, and that was definitely going to affect you.
Right. Madeline, do you want to add anything?
I would just say, yes, absolutely. It does need to tie in. What your goals would absolutely tie into, why you want to go to Stanford, which is, one of the essay questions. And if you want to be a strategy consultant, why? What do you want to accomplish? And why is that goal important?
And what kind of strategy consultant do you want to be? I mean, is there going to be any industry focus? Is it going to be large businesses, small business, medium-sized business? What industry, what location? And as Madeline said, why? I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Okay. I think you have to realize that if they're asking you a question, absolutely it's going to count. Now, I realize some of the boxes they ask for statistical reasons and that, yeah, okay, fine. But if they're asking about your career aspirations and then they have an essay question about, well, how are you going to use a degree, yes, definitely, it counts. So there's nothing wrong with saying you want to go into strategy consulting, but it is, I think, a little bit superficial, a little generic. So strategy consultants usually start out in strategy, and then they might become a partner. It might be on the international stage. It might be in a specific region. It might be a specific industry. Be more specific, okay? But anything that's asked in the application, you have to assume, unless it's just a statistical kind of thing, you have to assume that yes, it will affect your application and your application chances. Okay. Christine Lee asks, would I recommend these tips for current rising seniors and undergrad interested in the 2+2 program? Well, 2+2 is Harvard Business School, and we'll be having a Harvard Business School webinar in a few weeks. Rachel, maybe you can post the date. We don't have the landing page set up for it yet. Certainly the framework I recommend for 2+2. Stanford also has a deferred admissions program. And in other words, you are accepted, but you only actually matriculate in a couple of years. The framework is the same. the time span in which you're going to do it and the work experience requirements specifically are different. You're not expected to have worked full time. You're not expected to have achieved as much as someone who's worked for 3 or 4 years has achieved. But the potential for achievement, showing that potential, that has to be there. And obviously outstanding academic ability. And so you have to still show the leadership, you still have to still show the initiative, but the arena in which you are operating is going to be more constrained. Do you have anything to add to that one, Madeline or Esmeralda? Madeline, why don't you go first on that, if you have anything to add?
You know, I think you summed it up. I don't have anything else to add.
Okay. Esmeralda?
Yeah, same for me. The same for me. You said it perfectly.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Let's see, what do we have here? Okay. All right. Jennifer asks, if there's a specific reason as to why the GPA was lower for undergrad, would be a good idea to mention it and a place to bring it up on the application. There. Okay. Madeline, you want to take that one?
Well, if you have extraordinary circumstances as to why you have a low GPA, then it can be, you know, part of what you would like to tell the admissions committee. I mean, hopefully, you know, another criteria for, you know, your intellectual ability would be in a very high GMAT score. So hopefully, you know, you would have a high GMAT score to somewhat counter that. But you know, part of telling your story would be to, you know, when you're talking about, you know, your story and you know, and what matters to you and why. I mean, there can be a way to, you know, weave in some of your background and, you know, things that have happened to you and what you've spent your time on and your priorities that I think can be weaved into your essays, and I think it absolutely is, you know, something you might want to address if it is quite low. I mean, if it's a little bit below the average, it's not really going to, you know, be necessary, or, you know, there's not really a lot to say there. But if it's significant, you're definitely going to have to overcome it in your application.
Right. Esmeralda, do you want anything?
I would say, yeah, most schools, pretty much all, and Stanford is not an exception, will give you the room in the application to explain any extraordinary circumstances, like Madeline said. Definitely use that if the circumstances were extraordinary. If it was due to lack of maturity or something like that more common, then I would say there is no need to explain. However, on the other hand, if you have a low GPA, then definitely you will have to demonstrate your academic ability by showing a high score on the GMAT, for example, so that you still get a chance of admission. If you have a low score of the GMAT and a low GPA, then it will be a much harder case, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, if there's a specific reason as to why your GPA was lower, for example, and I hope this isn't true, you were sick one year, you were in an accident, there was some family issue, then you should definitely, there is an additional information section on the Stanford app, and you can use that section for that. We also, and I'm just putting it in the question window, I did a podcast, accept.com/137, on how to handle a low GPA and what you need to do. It's called 5 A's for your low GPA. And I you know, definitely provide context for a low GPA. And as Esmeralda said, Madeline both said, if there were extenuating circumstances, also take the initiative and show them what you can do when those circumstances either no longer exist or are no longer affecting your performance. All right, this is going to be the last question, and then I do have a final thought and a story. It's from Hillary. Would too many job switches, 4 jobs in 4 years, be a red flag for admissions? One was a startup layoff, and the other 2 were my choice to switch into jobs more aligned with my career goals and post-MBA interests. Esmeralda, you want to start with that one?
I was going to say that. I actually have a client going through a similar situation. And what I would say is, if you don't explain it correctly, if you don't give the reasons for the switches, for example, the one from one to the other was a career switch that actually represented a career progress for you. If you don't explain that, then definitely it's going to be a red flag. So what I would say is that, especially in your situation, you want to be extremely specific in your resume, giving proof of all your accomplishments and examples, and provide a very good picture of your growth. And your recommendations are also going to be key in terms of, especially here, you need 2 recommendations and explaining, also going back into why you left the previous company, for example, and provide reasons that it was not like a personality issue or something else, or but the fact that, that there was actually some growth involved. So definitely you want to be as specific as you can in your essays and in your resume, and also in the boxes where you can explain your responsibilities and the reasons you left, etc.
Right, and actually I just posted the slide that shows one of the questions that you're going to have to answer for each job is your reason for leaving. So a layoff, obviously, company-wide layoff, there's nothing you can do about it. If you left for a more responsible, better position, that just speaks well about you. And you should use that box. That's there for a reason. Madeline, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, I guess my first reaction is, 4 jobs in 4 years, it certainly could be a red flag. And I think when you write about your accomplishments, you need to be able to demonstrate that you've actually been able to have, and this can be in your resume, some significant impact in your positions, even if you're there a short time. And as Marilla said, you're going to have strong recommendations. I mean, if you can come up with strong recommendations, I mean, hopefully when you've moved on, you've left in good terms and are able to have, a good recommendation, obviously currently, but probably from, maybe one of your past supervisors as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Esmeralda. And thank you, Madeline. Thanks to all of you listeners for coming, your questions, your time, your attention. I know it's getting late for some of you. And now a final thought in that story. The thought: there is a paradox that's at the heart of MBA admissions. It's inherent to acceptance at top business schools. You have to demonstrate that you fit in and simultaneously that you stand out. By fitting in, I mean that you belong at your target school, in this case Stanford, in terms of your goals, your academics, your work experience, and your values. That you're going to be a valuable member of their community. And then you have to stand out. You have to stand out in a highly qualified, intensely competitive applicant pool. You have to show that you're going to contribute in a distinctive way and add a special something to make the admissions committee members proud that they voted to admit you. The 4 elements in my framework provide you with a structure. Let us help you with the implementation, the how I mentioned earlier. So that's the thought, the idea of paradox and how we can help you. A couple of years ago, we worked with a client who had less than common work experience and strong stats, but he came from a very much overrepresented group in the applicant pool, probably the most overrepresented group. He worked with Jennifer Bloom and today has referred many of his friends to Accepted. Here is what he wrote after his acceptance. Dear Jennifer, I got an accept from Stanford last night. Even as I wonder which one I want more between Stanford and Wharton, this is a dream come true. I am not a great writer, and so I'll keep this short for fear of ruining it. Thank you. I don't have any new words to express the gratitude that is filling my heart. I hope all your other candidates find wings to their dreams. This client's dreams, and so many of Accepted's clients' dreams, have found their wings. So can yours.